Alright, Karina Baby for September the 9th. Can't believe you're getting so big. September the 9th. From A Year Full of Stories, we have Flying Cakes. It was Alfred Jones's birthday. His mama was upset. She had burned his birthday cake and there wasn't time to bake another one. So Alfred went to see his friend, Hydia Broomstone, who also lived in Moonshine Mansions. Hildia was a witch. Do you think you could magic a birthday cake? Asked Alfred. I should think so, said Hildia. No magic, please, said Hildia's cat. Hildia ignored him. She thumbed through her spell book. Now, let me see. How to make crocodile's caterpillar cakes? What color would you like? Green, please, said Alfred. Hildia remembered some magic words, clicked her fingers, and bang! A small green snake appeared with a candle on its head. Nearly right, said Alfred. I knew it would go wrong, said Hubble. Hildia looked confused and tried again. This time there was a puff of smoke and a room filled with fairy cakes. Alfred was a bit disappointed. They weren't quite what he had been expecting. Oh, he had an expectation, and his expectation wasn't met, so he was disappointed. You can't have expectations, baby. If you have expectations, you're always going to be disappointed. Other people can't read your mind of what you want or what you need. You have to tell them what you want and what you need. And if they don't do it, you can't get upset because you can't expect things from them, right? That wasn't quite what he had expected. Those fairy cakes have got real wings, said Hubble, and they're flying away. It was true, the fairy cakes were flying through the open door. Soon they were fluttering all over Moonshine Mansion. Alfred chased after them, but he couldn't catch them. Meanwhile, Hildia was busy with another spell. Just as Alfred's friends were arriving for the party, there was a blinding flash, and a giant green birthday cake landed on the table. Wow, said Alfred. He thought Hildia was the cleverest witch of all. At that moment, Alfred's mama came into the room. How did that cake get here? She said. It appeared like magic, said Alfred truthfully. Did it now? Said Mrs. Jones. Well, magic or not, it's the best cake I've ever seen. Happy birthday, Alfred. Aw, so cute. Grandbaby, I love you so incredibly much. Alright. So let's read our next story, which is Beauty and the Beast. Once upon a time, in a far-off country, there lived a merchant who was enormously rich. He had 6 sons and 6 daughters, who were accompanied to having everything they fancied, and he did not find he had a penny too much. But a series of misfortunes befell them. One day their house caught fire and speedily burned to the ground, with all the splendid fortune, books, pictures, gold, silver, and precious goods it contained. Then the father suddenly lost every ship he had upon the sea because of pirates, shipwrecks, and fires. As though that were not enough, he heard that his clerk in distant countries whom he had trusted, had proved dishonest, and at last, from great wealth, he fell into direst poverty. All that he had left was a little house in a desolate place, a long distance from the town. The daughters at first hoped their friends, who had been so numerous while they were rich, would insist that they stay in their houses, but they soon found they were left alone. Those former friends even attributed the family's misfortune to the daughters' extravagance and showed no intention of offering any help. So nothing was left for them but to take their departure to the cottage, which stood in the middle of a dark forest. They were too poor to have any servants, and the girls had to work hard. The sons, for their part, cultivated the fields to earn their living. Roughly clothed and living in a simplest way, the girls never ceased to yearn for their luxuries and amusements of their former life. Only the youngest daughter tried to be brave and cheerful. She had been as sad as anyone when misfortune first overtook her father, but soon recovered her natural gaiety. She set to work to make the best of things, to amuse her father and brothers as well as she could, and persuade her sisters to join her in dancing and singing. But they would do nothing of the sort, and because she was not as gloomy as themselves, they declared their miserable lives was all she was fit for. But she was really far prettier and clever than they were. Indeed, she was so lovely she was always called Beauty. After 2 years, their father received news that one of his ships, which had been believed lost, had come safely into port, with a rich cargo. All the sons and daughters at once thought that their poverty was at an end, and wanted to set out directly for the town, but their father, who was more prudent, begged them to wait a little. Only the youngest daughter had any doubt but that they would soon again be rich and as they were before. They all loaded their father with demands for jewels and dresses, which it would have taken a fortune to buy. Only Beauty did not ask for anything. Her father noticed her silence and said, "And what shall I bring for you, Beauty?" "The one thing I wish for is to see you come home safely," she answered. But this reply annoyed her sisters, who fancied she was blaming them for having asked for such costly things. Her father, however, was pleased, and he urged her to choose something. "Well, dear father," she said, "as you insist upon it, I beg that you will bring me a rose. I have not seen one since we came here, and I love them so much." The merchant set out, only to find that his former companions, believing him to be dead, have divided his cargo among themselves. After 6 months of trouble and expenses, he found himself as poor as when he started on his journey. To make matters worse, he returned during a terrible snowstorm. By the time he was within a few miles of his home, he was almost exhausted with cold and fatigue. Though he knew it would take some hours to get through the forest, he resolved to go on. But night overtook him, and the deep snow and bitter frost made it impossible for his horse to carry him any further. The only shelter he could find was a hollow trunk of a great tree, and there he crouched all night. The howling of the wolves kept him awake, and when at last day broke, the falling snow had covered every path, and he did not know which way to turn. At length he made out some sort of way. At length he made out some sort of way, but it was so rough and slippery that he fell more than once. Presently it led him into an avenue of orange trees, which ended in a splendid castle. It seemed to the merchant very strange that no snow had fallen in the avenue of trees, which was covered with flowers and fruit. When he reached the forest courtyard, he saw before him a flight of agate steps. He went up and passed through several some splendidly furnished rooms. The the pleasant warmth of the air revived him, and he felt very hungry. But there seemed to be nobody in all this vast and splendid place. Deep silence reigned everywhere. And at last, tired of roaming through empty rooms and galleries, he stopped in a room smaller than the rest. Oh my gosh. This is actually a really long book. And expense he found himself smaller than the rest, were a cheerful fire and a couch was drawn up before it. Thinking this must be prepared for someone who was expected, he sat down to wait till he should come, and very soon fell into a sweet sleep. When extreme hunger woken him, after several hours, he was still alone, but a little table with a good dinner on it had been drawn up close to him. He lost no time in beginning his meal, hoping he might soon thank his considerate host, whoever he might be. But no one appeared, and even after another long sleep, from which he awoke completely refreshed, there was no sign of anybody, though a fresh meal of dainty cakes and fruit was on the table at his elbow. Being naturally timid, he grew terrified of the silence, and he resolved to search once more through all the rooms, but it was of no use. There was no sign of life in the palace. Then he went down into the garden, and thought it was winter everywhere else, and though it was winter everywhere else, here the sun shone, and the birds sang, and the flowers bloomed, and all the air was soft and sweet. The merchant, in ecstatics at all he saw and heard, said to himself, "All this must be meant for me. I will go this moment and bring my children to share all these delights." In spite of being so cold and weary, when he reached the castle, he had taken his horse to the stable and fed it. Now he thought he would saddle it for his homeward journey, and he turned down the path which led to the stable. This path had a hedge of roses on each side of it, and the merchant thought he had never seen such exquisite flowers. They reminded him of his promise to Beauty, and he stopped and had just gathered one to take to her when he was startled by a strange noise behind him. Turning around, he saw a frightful beast. "Who told you you might gather my roses?" cried the beast in a terrible voice. "Was it not enough that I sheltered you in my palace and was kind to you? This is the way you show your gratitude, by stealing my flowers. But your insolence shall not go unpunished." The merchant, terrified by these furious words, dropped the fateful rose, and turned himself on his knee, cried, "Pardon me, noble sir, I am truly grateful for your hospitality. It was so magnificent, I could not imagine you would be offended by me taking such a little thing as a rose." But the beast's anger was not lessened by his speech. "You are very ready with excuses and flattery," he cried, "but that will not save you from the death you deserve." "Alas," thought the merchant, "if my daughter Beauty could only know to what danger her rose had brought me." And in despair he began to tell the beast all his misfortunes and the reasons for his journey, not forgetting to mention Beauty's request. A king's ransom would hardly have procured all that my other daughters asked for, he said, "but I thought it might be at least take Beauty her rose. I beg you to forgive me, for you see I meant no harm." The beast said, in a few less furious tones, I will forgive you on one condition, that you will give me one of your daughters." "Ah," cried the merchant, "if I were cruel enough to buy my own life at the expense of one of my children's, what excuse could I invest to bringing her here?" "None," answered the beast. "If she comes at all, she must come willingly. On no other condition will I have her. See if any of them is courageous enough and loves you enough to come and save your life. You seem to be an honest man, and I will trust you to go home. I give you a month to see if any of your daughters will come back with you and stay here, so that you may go free. If none of them is willing, you must come alone, for then you will belong to me. And do not imagine that you can hide from me, for it will fail to keep your word. For if you fail to keep your word, I will come and fetch you," added the beast grimly. The merchant accepted this proposal. He promised to return at the time appointed, and then, anxious to escape from the presence of the beast, he asked permission to set off at once. But the beast answered that he could not go until the next day. "Then you will find a horse ready for you," he said. "Now go and eat your supper and await my orders." The poor merchant, more dead than alive, went back to his room, where the most delicious supper was already served on a little table drawn up before the blazing fire. But he was too terrified to eat, and only tasted a few of the dishes. He, for fear of beasts, should be angry if he did not obey his orders. When he had finished, the beast warned him to remember the agreement, and to prepare his daughter for exactly what she had to expect. "Do not get up tomorrow," he added, "until you see the sun rise and hear the golden bell ring. Then you will find your breakfast waiting for you, and the horse you are to ride will be ready in the courtyard. He will also bring you back again when you come with your daughter a month from now. Farewell, take a rose to Beauty, and remember your promise." The merchant lay down until dawn. Then after breakfast he went to gather Beauty's flower, and mounted his horse, which carried him off so swiftly that in an instant he had lost sight of the palace. He was still wrapped in gloomy thoughts when it stopped before the door of his cottage. His sons and daughters, who had been uneasy at his long absence, rushed to meet him, eager to know the result of his journey, which, seeing him mounted upon a splendid horse and wrapped in a rich mantle, they supposed to be favorable. But he hid the truth from them at first, only saying sadly to Beauty, as he gave her the rose, "Here is what you asked me to bring you. Little you know what it has cost." Presently he told them his adventures from beginning to end, and then they were all very unhappy. The girls lamented loudly over their lost hopes, and the sons declared their father should not return to the terrible castle, but he reminded them that he had promised to go back. Then the girls were very angry with Beauty, and said it was all her fault. If she had asked for something sensible, this would never have happened. Poor Beauty, much distressed, said to them, "I have indeed caused this misfortune, but who could have guessed that to ask for a rose would cause so much misery? But as I did the misfortune, it is only just that I should suffer for it. I will therefore go back with my father to keep his promise." At first nobody would hear of it. Her father and brothers, who loved her dearly, declared nothing should make them let her go, but Beauty was firm. As the time drew nearer, she divided her little possessions among her sisters and said goodbye to everything she loved. When the fatal day came, she and her father both mounted the horse which had brought him back. It seemed to fly rather than gallop, but so smoothly that Beauty was not frightened. Indeed, she would have enjoyed the journey if she had not feared what might happen at the end of it. Her father tried to persuade her to go back home with him, but in vain. The merchant was too terrified to reply, but Beauty answered sweetly, "Good evening, Beast." "Have you come willingly?" asked the Beast. "Will you be content to stay here when your father has gone away?" Beauty answered bravely that she was quite prepared to stay. "I am pleased with you," said the Beast. "You have come of your own accord, so you may remain. As for you, old man," he added, turning to the merchant, "at sunrise tomorrow take your departure. When the bell rings, get up quickly and eat your breakfast, and you will find the same horse waiting to take you home." Then turning to Beauty, he said, "Take your father into the next room and help him choose gifts for your brothers and sisters. You will find 2 traveling trunks there. Fill them as full as you can. It is only just that you should send them something very precious as a remembrance." Then he went away. Beauty was beginning to think with great dismay of her father's departure, but they went into the next room and were greatly surprised at the riches they found. They were splendid dresses fit for a queen, and when Beauty opened the chest, she was dazzled by the glorious jewels laying in heaps upon every shelf. After choosing a vast quantity for each of her sisters, she opened the last chest and discovered that it was full of gold. "I think, father," she said, "that this gold will be more useful to you. We had better take out the other things and fill the trunk with it." So they did this, but the more they put in, the more room there seemed to be. And at last they put back all the jewels and dresses they had taken out, and Beauty even added as many more of the jewels as she could carry. Even then the trunk was not too full, but they were so heavy as an elephant could not even have carried them. "The beast was mocking us," cried the merchant. "He pretended to give us all these things, knowing that I could not carry them away." "Let us wait and see," answered Beauty. "I cannot believe he meant to deceive us. All we can do is to fasten them and have them ready." So they did this and returned to the little room. When they found breakfast prepared, the merchant ate with a good appetite, and the Beast generously made him believe he might perhaps venture to come back soon to see Beauty. But she felt sure her father was leaving her forever, so she was very sad when the bell rang sharply. They went down into the courtyard, where 2 horses were waiting, one loaded with the 2 trunks, and the other for him to ride. They were pawing the ground in their impatience to start, and the merchants bade Beauty a hasty farewell. As soon as he was mounted, the horses went off at such a pace that she lost sight of him in an instant. Then Beauty began to cry and wandered sadly back to her own room. But she soon found she was very sleepy, and as she had nothing better to do, she lay down and instantly fell asleep. And then she dreamed she was walking by a brook bordered with trees, and lamenting her sad fate, when a young prince, handsomer than anyone she had ever seen, and with a voice that went straight to her heart, came and said to her, "Ah, Beauty, you are not so unfortunate as you suppose. Here you will be rewarded for all you have suffered elsewhere. Your every wish shall be granted. Only try to learn who I am, no matter how I may be disguised, for I love you dearly, and in making me happy, you will find your own happiness. Be as true-hearted as you are beautiful, and we shall have nothing left to wish for." "What can I do, Prince, to make you happy?" said the Beauty. "Only be grateful," he answered, "and do not trust too much in your eyes. Above all, do not desert me until you have saved me from my cruel misery." As her dream continued, she found herself in a room with a stately and beautiful lady, who said to her, "Dear Beauty, try not to regard all you have left behind you. You are destined for a better fate. Only do not let yourself be deceived by appearance." Beauty found her dreams so interesting that she was in no hurry to awake, but presently the clock rose her by calling her name softly 12 times. Then she rose and found her dressing table set with everything she could possibly want, and when she was dressed, she found dinner waiting in a room next to hers. But dinner does not take very long when one is alone, and soon she sat down cozily in the corner of a sofa and began to think about the charming prince she had seen in her dream. So what did the dream tell her, baby? It told her, don't be deceived by what people look like, right? The beast might not be so handsome to her own eyes, but he's like, don't trust in your eyes, trust in your heart, right? because beauty comes from within. I always tell you that. You're beautiful because your heart is beautiful, not because of what you physically look like. You're a beautiful little girl, but it's because it comes from within. And it says that if she behaves well, right, if she is true to her heart and behaves well, then she will be rewarded with everything that she desires, which is very true. All right. He said, I could make him happy, said Beauty to herself. It seems then that this horrible beast keeps him a prisoner. How can I set him free? I wonder why they both told me not to trust to appearances. But after all, it was only a dream, so why should I trouble myself about it? I had better find something to do to amuse myself. So she began to explore some of the rooms in the palace. The first she entered was lined with mirrors. Beauty saw herself reflected in every side and thought she had never seen such a charming room. Then a bracelet which had been hanging from a chandelier caught her eye. And on taking it down, she was greatly surprised to find that it held a portrait of her unknown admirer, just as she had seen him in her dream. With great delight she slipped the bracelet on her arm and went on into a gallery of pictures, where she soon found a portrait of some of the handsome prince, as large as life, and so well painted that as she studied it, he seemed to smile kindly at her. Tearing herself away from the portrait at last, she passed into a room which contained every musical instrument under the sun, and here she amused herself for a long while in trying them. By this time it was growing dusk, and wax candles and diamond and ruby candlesticks lit themselves in every room. Beauty found her supper served just at the time she liked to have it. But she did not see anyone or hear a sound, and though her father had warned her she would be alone, she began to find it rather dull. Presently she heard the beast coming, and wondered terribly if he meant to eat her now. However, he did not seem at all ferocious, and only said gruffly, "Good evening, Beauty." She answered cheerfully and managed to conceal her terror. The beast asked her how she had been amusing herself, and she told him all the rooms she had seen. Then he asked her if she thought she could be happy in a palace, and Beauty answered that everything was so beautiful she could be very hard to please if she could not be happy. She would be very hard to please if she could not be happy. After an hour's talk, Beauty began to think the beast was not nearly so terrible as she had supposed. Then he rose to leave, and said in a gruff voice, "Do you love me, Beauty? Will you marry me?" "Oh, what shall I say?" cried Beauty, for she was afraid to make the beast angry by refusing. "Say yes or no without fear," he replied. "Oh, no, beast," said Beauty hastily. "Since you will not, good night, Beauty," he said. And she answered, "Good night, beast," very glad to have her refusal had not provoked him. After he was gone, she was very soon in bed and dreaming of her unknown prince. She thought he came and said, "Ah, Beauty, why are you so unkind to me? I fear I am fated to be unhappy for many a long day still." Then her dream changed, but the charming prince figured in all of them. When morning came, she decided to amuse herself in the garden. She was astonished to find that every place was familiar to her, and presently she came to a very brook at the myrtle trees where she first met her prince in her dream. That made her think more than ever that he must be kept a prisoner by the beast. When she tired, she went back to the palace and found a new room full of materials for every kind of work, ribbons to make into bows and silks to work into flowers. There was also an array full of rare an aviary full of rare birds, which were so tame that they flew to Beauty as soon as they saw her and perched upon her shoulders and her head. Pretty little creatures, she said, how I wish your cage was nearer my room, then I may often hear you sing. So saying, she opened the door and found, to her delight, that it led into her own room, though she had thought it was on the other side of the palace. There were more birds in her room, farther on parrots and cockatoos that could talk, and they greeted Beauty by name. Indeed, she found them so entertaining that she took one or two back to her room, and they talked to her while she was at supper. The beast pays his usual visits and put to her the same question he had asked before, and then with a gruff good night he took his departure, and Beauty went to bed to dream of her mysterious prince. The days passed swiftly in different amusements, and after a while Beauty found another strange thing, which often pleased her when she had tired of being alone. There was one room which she had not noticed particularly. It was empty except that under each of the windows stood a very comfortable chair. The last time she had looked out the window, it seemed a black curtain prevented her from seeing anything outside. But the second time she went into the room, she happened to be tired and sat down in one of the chairs. Instantly the curtain was rolled aside, and the most amusing per diem was acted before her. There were dancers and colored lights, music, and pretty dresses, and it was all so gay that Beauty was in ecstatics. After that she tried the other 7 windows in turn, and there was some new, surprising entertainment to be seen from each of them, so Beauty never could feel lonely any more. Every evening after supper the beast came to see her, and always before saying good night he would ask her, in his terrible voice, "Beauty, will you marry me?" It occurred to Beauty, now that she understood him better, that when she said no, Beast went away quickly and quietly, and quite sad. Her happy dreams of the handsome young prince soon made her forget the poor beast, and the only thing that disturbed her was being told to distract appearance, to let her heart guide her and not her eyes. Think about this as she would, she could not understand. So everything went on for a long time until at last, happy as she was, Beauty began to yearn for the sight of her father and her brothers and her sisters. One night, seeing her looking very sad, the beast asked what was the matter. Beauty had quite ceased to be afraid of him. Now she knew He was really gentle in spirit, of his furious looks and his dreadful voice. So she answered that she wished to see her home once more. Upon hearing this, the bee seemed distressed, and cried out miserably, "Ah, Beauty, have you the heart to desert an unhappy beast like me, like this? What more do you want to make you happy? Is it because you hate me that you want to escape?" "No, dear beast," answered Beauty softly, "I do not hate you, and I should be very sorry never to see you any more. But I long to see my father again. Only let me go for 2 months, and I promise to come back to you and stay for the rest of my life." The beast, who had been slightly sighing unhappily while she spoke, now replied, "I cannot refuse you anything you ask, even though it should cost me my life. Take the 4 boxes you will find in your room next to your own, and fill them with everything you wish to take with you. But remember, you promised to come back when 2 months are over, for if you do not return in good time, you will find your faithful beast dead. You will not need any chariot to bring you back. Only say goodbye to your fathers and brothers and sisters the night before you come away. And when you have gone to bed, turn this ring round upon your finger and say firmly, 'I wish to go back to my palace and see my beast again.' Good night, Beauty. Fear nothing. Sleep peacefully, and before long you shall see your family once more." As soon as Beauty was alone, she hastened to fill the boxes, and with all the rare and precious things she saw about her. And only when she was tired of heaping things into them did she seem to be full. Then she went to bed, but could hardly sleep for joy. When at last she began to dream of her beloved prince, she was grieved to see him stretched upon a grassy bank, sad and weary, and hardly like himself. "What is the matter?" she cried. But he looked at her reproachfully and said, "How can you ask me, cruel one? Are you not leaving me to my death, perhaps?" "Ah, don't be sorrowful," cried Beauty. "I am only going to assure my father that I am safe and happy. I have promised the beast faithfully I will come back, and I know that he would die of grief if I did not keep my word." "What would that matter to you?" asked the prince. "Surely you would not care." "Indeed, I should be ungrateful if I did not care for such a kind beast," cried Beauty indulgently. "I would die to save him from pain. I assure you, it is not his fault he is so ugly." Just then a strange sound woke her. Someone was speaking not very far away. Opening her eyes, she found herself in the room she had never seen before, which was certainly not as splendid as those she had seen in the Beast's palace. Where could she be? She rose and dressed hastily, and then saw that the boxes she had packed the night before were all in the room. Suddenly she heard her father's voice and rushed out to greet him joyfully. Her brothers and sisters were astonished at her appearance, for they had never expected to see her again. Oh, sorry, baby. Let's see the clock already. She found herself in a room she had never seen before, which was certainly not as splendid as those she had seen in the Beast's palace. Where could she be? She rose and dressed hastily. Then she saw that the boxes she had packed the night before were all in the room. Suddenly she heard her father's voice and rushed out to greet him joyfully. Her brothers and sisters were astonished at her appearance, for they had never expected to see her again. Beauty asked her father what he thought her strange dreams meant, and why the prince in them consistently begged her not to trust appearances. After much consideration he answered, "You tell me yourself that the Beast, frightfully as he is, loves you dearly and deserves your loves and gratitude for his gentleness and kindness. I think the prince must mean you to understand that you ought to reward the Beast by doing as he wishes you to, in spite of his ugliness." Beauty could not help seeing that this seemed likely. Still, when she thought of her dear prince, who was so handsome, she did not feel at all inclined to marry the Beast. At any rate, the 2 months she need not decide, but could enjoy herself with her family. Though they were rich now, and lived in a town again, and had plenty of acquaintances, Beauty found that nothing amused her very much. She often thought of the palace where she was so happy, especially as at home she never once dreamed of her beloved prince, and she felt quite sad without him. And her sisters seemed quite used to being without her, and even found her rather in the way. So she would not have been sorry when the 2 months were over, but for her father and brothers, she did not have the courage to say good-bye to them. Every day when she rose, she meant to say it at night, and when night came, she put it off again, until at last she had a dismal dream which helped her to make up her mind. She thought she was wandering in a lovely path at the palace gardens, where she heard where she heard groans. Running quickly to see what could be the matter, she found the Beast stretched out upon his side, appearing dead. He reproached her faintly, which being the case of his distress, and at the same moment a stately lady appeared and said very gravely, "Ah, Beauty, see what happens when people do not keep their promises. If you had delayed 1 day more, you would have found him dead." Beauty was so terrified by this dream that the very next evening she said good-bye to her father and to her brothers and her sisters. As soon as she went to bed, she turned around upon her finger the ring which the Beast had given her, and said firmly, "I wish to go back to my palace and to see my Beast again." Then she fell asleep instantly, and only woke up to hear the clock saying, "Beauty, Beauty," 12 times in its magical voice, which told her she was really in the palace once more. Everything was just as before, and her birds were very glad to see her, but Beauty thought she had never known such a long day. She was so anxious to see the Beast again that she felt as if supper time would never come. But when it came, no Beast appeared. After listening and waiting for a long time, she ran down into the garden and searched for him. Up and down the paths and avenues ran poor Beauty, calling him. No one answered, and not a trace of him could she find. At last Beauty saw that she was standing opposite a shady path she had seen in her dream. She rushed down to it, and sure enough there was the Beast asleep. As Beauty thought, quite glad to have found him, she ran upon and stroked his head, but To her horror, he did not move or open his eyes. "Oh, he is dead, and it is all my fault," cried Beauty, weeping bitterly. But then, looking at him again, she fancied he still breathed. Hastily fetched some water from the nearest fountain and sprinkled it over his face. And to hear great delight, he began to revive. "Oh, beast, how you frightened me," she cried. "I never knew how much I loved you until just now, when I feared I was too late to save your life. Can you really love such an ugly creature as I am?" asked the beast faintly. "Ah, Beauty, you come only just in time. I was dying because I thought you had forgotten your promise. But go back now and rest. I shall see you again by and by." Beauty, who had half expected he would be angry with her, was reassured by his gentle voice, and went back to the palace, and after a while the beast came in to visit her and talked about the time she had spent with her father, asking if she had enjoyed herself, and if they had all been glad to see her. Beauty quite enjoyed telling him all that had happened to her. When at last the time came for him to leave, he asked, as he so often asked before, "Beauty, will you marry me?" She answered softly, "Yes, dear beast." As she spoke, a blaze of light sprang up before the window of the palace. Fireworks crackled and guns boomed, and across the avenue of the orange trees, in letters all made of fireflies, was written, "Long live the prince and his bride." Turning to ask the beast what it could all mean, Beauty found he had disappeared, and in his place stood a long-loved prince. At the same moment the wheels of the chariot were heard upon the terrace, and the two ladies entered the room. One of them Beauty recognized was a stately lady she had seen in her dreams. The other was so queenly that Beauty hardly knew which to greet first. But the one she recognized said to her companion, "Well, my queen, this is Beauty, who has had the courage to rescue your son from the terrible enchantment. They love each other, and only your consent to the marriage is waiting to make them perfectly happy." "I consent with all my heart." What a great mother-in-law. "I consent with all my heart." Beautiful, cried the queen. "How can I ever thank you enough, charming girl, for having restored my dear son to his natural form?" And then she tenderly embraced Beauty and the prince, who had meanwhile been greeting the other lady, who was a fairy, and receiving her congratulations. "Now," said the fairy to Beauty, "I suppose you would like me to send for your father and all your brothers and sisters to dance at the wedding." And so she did, and the marriage was celebrated the very next day in the utmost splendor, and Beauty and the prince lived happily ever after. Oh, I love the book version of this. Oh my gosh, that was the best book ever. I'm so glad that I'm recording books for you to listen to later. I wish that my father did recordings of everything that we were doing when we were little, because my father would do so many fun things with us, and none of it was recorded, which is why I really wanted to record your life. Like, yeah, I was scared at certain points in time, so I just recorded things in general. Like, Mama thought that recording things would make her safe. That wasn't true. It should have been true. It should have been true in 2017. that if you have something recorded, it should make a person safe no matter what they say to agree with their husband, because a promise is a promise. But it wasn't true, because people are people and they make mistakes, right? People are people and they make mistakes, and they don't investigate things, and they go based on the word of a scared housewife. And it's okay, because soon enough it's going to be okay, because Mama's going to be able to hold you in my lap and read you books again. It's going to be okay eventually. Sorry. But I love you, and I miss you, Karina, so very much. I love that book, Beauty and the Beast. It's so beautiful. Beauty gave up her existence to save her father, because she loves him, and then she married a beast that she grew because of his heart, how beautiful he really is. Alright, Karina baby, let's sing. We sit and watch the rain as it falls from the sky, and we are glad to be inside where it is warm and dry. Oh yes, I do love the rain. It keeps the earth so clean and helps the pretty flowers grow from the mountains to the streams. And baby, I just love you, and I miss you so incredibly much. I miss you so incredibly much. And sometimes you have to give up your life to save the people that you love. Because Mama used to always say, if someone's hurting, I'd much rather it be me than anybody else. I am the mama. And honestly, it would have been a lot better if I just stayed with you, but I didn't see a way to do that back then. I couldn't have your papa in trouble for even a second, because your papa works outside the home and supports us financially. Remember how we talked about Lolly and Yo-Yo the day before? Well, really it was the night before. How Lolly and Yo-Yo have to work really hard outside the home because they have to pay their bills, like Papa has to work outside the home to pay the bills. We had plans to go see Lolly and Yo-Yo that Tuesday and Thursday, baby. We will make plans again once more. You will make plans again with me, I promise. To go and see whatever it is you want to see and do whatever it is that you want to do. I love you. I love you. I love you. I love you, and I miss you. More than you'll know. More than you'll ever know, baby. I love you, and I miss you. Mama has a weighted blanket now, and Mama wants to get you a weighted blanket. They have these pretty little pink ones at the store, and I want to pick one up for you. I want to get a couple more weighted blankets. I want to have some in the car for when we go and do like movies in the park and stuff soon, because the weighted blankets really do keep you warm. The unweighted blankets like Mama was using for movies in the park really don't. I'm so glad to have new experiences, to be able to be like, oh, well, I do want this or that. Because I never would have realized how useful a weighted blanket is. God lets us go through trials and tribulations. God took everything away from Job, right? He took away all 6 of his children. He took away everything that he had. Just like he took everything away from Beauty's father, right? Merchant lost everything. He lost his house. He lost all of his goods. He lost everything, but he got to keep his children and a cottage that he owned far away from the town, which is such a blessing. Baby, no matter where you are, your home. Your home is where you eat and where you sleep. So your body, first and foremost, is your home. It's the only thing that you actually own, and it's the only thing that really can't be taken away from you. You own your own body, baby. I just want you to know that. Alright, Karina, baby, let's do Lila Tove and good night to you. Lila Tove, may your dreams come true. We sing Lila Tove, may Israel protect you throughout the night until we reach the morning light. Karina, baby, I love you, and I miss you, and I will always love you. Like Papa used to say, Mama's his sun, Papa's my moon, and you are quite literally our rainbow baby, and we love you. We love you no matter what, honey. I love you no matter what. I hope you have a good day and a good night's rest. I love you no matter what, my angel. Bye, baby.